Hello and welcome to Newshour, coming to you live from London. I'm James Kamarasamy. The White House has confirmed that the negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are heading to Islamabad for talks with Iran on Saturday. An Iranian delegation headed by its foreign minister has already arrived in the Pakistani capital. We'll have more on that diplomacy in a few moments, but we're going to begin with how the war in the Middle East is focusing minds in Europe, not just because of the economic impact of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, but because of the reaction from the White House to the reluctance of NATO allies to support the US military action. For weeks, President Trump has been warning of consequences, and now a leaked email from the Pentagon suggests what they might be. One idea floated is that Washington could suspend the most vocal European opponent of the war, Spain, from NATO. Today, a NATO spokesperson has said the alliance's founding treaty does not allow a member to be expelled. And today as well, the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth restated the administration's position.
Europe and Asia have benefited from our protection for decades, but the time for free riding is over. America and the free world deserve allies who are capable, who are loyal, and who understand that being an ally is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. We are not counting on Europe, but they need the Strait of Hormuz much more than we do, and might want to start doing less talking and having less fancy conferences in Europe and get in a boat.
Well, there has been a two-day gathering, not a conference, but an EU leaders' summit in Cyprus this week, where some leaders stressed the need for NATO unity, but also for Europe to be more security self-sufficient. With one of those leaders, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk, questioning whether a Trump White House would be loyal to NATO's Clause 5, that's its mutual defence pledge, if Russia attacked Europe. EU officials have been asked to look closer at a mutual assistance clause in the Treaty of the European Union. You may be hearing more about Article 42.7 in the months ahead. Arantxa González Leia was Spain's foreign minister between 2020 and 2021 under the current Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez. Does she think the suggestions in the leaked Pentagon email should be taken seriously?
I think it is serious. I think that there is a serious hostility on the US administration on Europe. We've seen this very clearly in the national security strategy that they have published, where they make no secret of their desire to weaken Europe. And it's very serious. But when I say that we don't have to take it literally, is that there is no possibility for the US to suspend membership of any other country within NATO.
What about the feeling in Europe about whether the United States would come to its aid? We've heard today in an interview with the Financial Times the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, saying there are questions about whether America would be loyal to its commitment under the NATO Charter. What's the view in Spain?
The most worrying signal we have received from the US as regards NATO, it's not about suspending members. It's the fact that the US is weakening the security alliance that NATO represents, which is why Europe, in my view, and I say Europe, not the European Union, Europe has to take its defense and its security much more in its own hands.
America has been clear that NATO allies need to commit to 5% of GDP on defence by 2035. Spain is the only NATO member that refused to do that. So isn't it fair to criticise Spain for not pulling its weight?
One should look at the facts, and the facts show that in the last 3 years, Spain has done a massive effort on defence spending, moving from a 0.7% to a 2% of GDP spending on defense. This is a major increase.
But from a very low benchmark. I mean, the commitment to 2% was made years ago.
Correct, but it shows that Spain is taking this commitment seriously. As regards the 5%, it's a target that many question it in private, few have done it in public.
Is it really going to be possible to come up with a European alternative to NATO?
These same democracies are already doing this under NATO, in NATO and the US command. So it's not that they cannot do it. It's just that they trusted NATO to be the preferred vehicle.
That was Arantxa González Laya, the former Spanish foreign minister. Darren Selnick is a former Deputy Chief of Staff to the US Defence Secretary, or as he is known in this administration, Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. I asked him for his reaction to the leaked Pentagon email.
Well, it's a shame that it got leaked. I'm sure that was classified, but obviously someone was not in agreement with some of the memo and options going forward. As someone who's worked in the administration, was Deputy Chief of Staff to Secretary Hegseth for a few months in 2025 at the Department of Defense, I know that all options are always on the table, and there's coordination with the president, with Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth. So there are all military options, and there, of course, there is foreign relations and whatnot, and they go hand in hand. I wouldn't be surprised if that is one of the options on the table, because as someone who's also retired Air Force officer, what is the use of an alliance like NATO and someone like Spain if we can't even use the base for our own operations? And what's the point of the base? What's the point of NATO if you don't have people supporting operations?
Now, a NATO spokesperson has said that the NATO founding treaty does not provide for a member to be expelled, saying that actually, even if this is being considered in the Pentagon, it just can't happen.
Well, that's probably correct. And in these memos, they're not talking legalese, they're talking options and thoughts. Obviously, General Counsel and White House Counsel would look at how does this actually be done, and then they would have it do it. But typically in these sorts of memos, it's about what kind of message the president can send, not what he would actually do or how he would actually do it. So I think right there is the message. And the message is the president is very unhappy with some of the NATO partners and rethinking the whole NATO strategy. So that's pretty typical if you watch how the President Trump operates in the United States, for him to send a message first and then come up with a different actual strategy later.
Well, let's turn to a country which is now spending 5% of its GDP on its defence, and that's Poland. I don't know if you've seen the interview that the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has given to the Financial Times. He has questioned whether the United States would be loyal to its NATO commitment to defend Europe if there was a Russian attack. When you hear that, what do you think?
I think that President Trump would absolutely, in the United States, would absolutely adhere to that NATO alliance agreement and treaty.
But when it's being questioned by a country that has stepped up to the plate, done everything America has asked of it, does that concern you?
It does concern me in terms of what is happening back channel, in terms of talks and communications with the State Department. And State Department career people are not always the best communicators. And I think sometimes people misunderstand how President Trump operates. So it is concerning, and I would hope Secretary Rubio would be having some conversations with Poland and the delegation, because the United States absolutely would do that.
That's an interesting insight you're giving us as someone who was on the inside into how things work. Everyone reads the Truth Social posts and hears President Trump put out these statements, and he's direct, says things that other presidents don't. But you're saying that there are back channels. The State Department will be normally telling America's allies, look, this is a signal, we can work this out, but you need to do certain things. Is that, that's normally how it works, is it?
It is. And the president comes from a CEO mindset, negotiating mindset, and he is a hard negotiator. And so he lays things out on the table, but he will settle for what is agreeable and a win for both sides. But he wants to send a message, and the message is he's unhappy and for the way things have been going and the way people have not been partnering. And, it's not unreasonable to say, do you need to rethink how NATO operates and structures after all these decades? It's a normal thing. So there's the public facing of the president, and then there's the private facing. And it's really two different dynamics, if you ever have the chance to see that.
Well, a little window there into how things operate in the Trump administration. Darren Selnick, former Deputy Chief of Staff to the US Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Let's turn to the diplomatic news. The news that the US negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are heading to Islamabad on Saturday for talks with Iran. Our correspondent Shaima Khalil is in Washington, D.C. I asked her what has unlocked this and has led to them going.
I think it's the fact that now you've got two sides that are claiming control and ownership of Iran's territorial waters, be it the Strait of Hormuz, be it Iran's ports. They both have a choking hold on each other. Pete Hegseth today adopted a very defiant tone. He said that the U.S. has an ironclad stronghold on Iranian waters, on Iranian ports. Nothing goes in, nothing goes out. 35 vessels have been told to turn around. One was non-compliant and it was shot at last weekend. But I feel like that has, in a way, put another stumbling block into this diplomacy. One thing I wanted to pick up on what your previous guest was saying, the fact that this is the way that Donald Trump operates. I think the whole scene right now also tells you that it's telling of how Mr. Trump does diplomacy, that it's all very personal, that you're either with or against him, and you're seeing that with allies. But I think also it speaks of how the U.S. and Iran are approaching this next bout of diplomatic efforts, that there's a lot of mistrust there. These are two sides that are still sounding each other out. And so you go in with preliminary groups, be it Jared Kushner, Steve Hegseth, and the Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi, and then maybe a second round of diplomats with more talks.
Yes, that's what the White House is saying, that J.D. Vance, the Vice President, is ready to go, but depending on how those talks, the preliminary talks go.
That's right. And it also tells you that maybe they still don't have any points of concessions. I think that the United States has announced the ceasefire. President Trump has announced the ceasefire. We don't know how long this is going to last. But also it's the fact that they've replaced that with the blockade on Iranian waters. Iran sees this as a direct violation of the ceasefire. They say that the Strait of Hormuz is not going to be opened with this blockade. So I think if these talks, if what comes out of these talks is maybe a timeline of how the Iranian waters is going to ease on the Iranian side and on the American side, I think that would be a strong indication that things can move forward.
The BBC's Shaima Khalil in Washington will certainly be keeping an eye on those talks in Pakistan over the weekend. Just to say that Iranian state television has reported that the Iranian foreign minister has said he has no scheduled meetings with the US in Islamabad, but that Pakistan can convey Iran's concerns for ending the conflict. You're listening to the BBC World Service. This is Newshour, coming to you live from London with James Kamarasamy. And coming up later on in the programme, we'll hear how people in Russia are coping with ever more restricted internet access.
We are losing money every time there is a blockage of internet, there is a blockage of Telegram, there is a blockage of WhatsApp. We are losing, and no one is caring about me. So I need to care about myself here as well.
Aren't you frightened? Aren't you scared?
I'm very. I'm shaking.
That report from our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg in about 15 minutes' time. The headlines at this hour: the White House says that President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner will travel to Pakistan for peace talks with Iran. The Vice President J.D. Vance is also ready to go if the talks prove successful. And there have been explosions in southern Lebanon as Israel said it was targeting Hezbollah positions despite the ceasefire extension. You're listening to the BBC World Service. This is Newshour, coming to you live from London with James Kamarasamy. A lecturer at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem has filed a complaint against the Israeli police after he was detained for wearing a kippah, a Jewish religious head covering, embroidered with both Israeli and Palestinian flags. Dr. Alex Sinclair says the kippah was returned to him with the Palestinian flag cut out. I've been talking to him about what happened.
I live in Israel. I'm an Israeli. I call myself a Zionist. An Israeli is trying to make Israel better, who believes in Israel's right to exist along with the right of the Palestinians to exist and to have a state. I live in a small town in the middle of Israel called Modi'in, and I have a kippah, a yarmulke, a Jewish cap, a Jewish ritual hat that I wear the whole time as a religious Jew, as somebody who is an observant Jew. But because I'm a left-leaning Jew, I believe in a left-leaning Israeli, I believe in a two-state solution. I believe that just as the Jewish people have a right to self-determination and statehood, so do the Palestinian people have a right to self-determination and statehood. And so because of that, for many, many years, I've worn a kippah, a yarmulke, with both the Israeli flag and the Palestinian flag on it. I have them both woven into it.
Yeah, so that's the background. Just tell us then what actually happened on Monday.
I was sitting in a cafe in my town, a cafe where I often sit. I called it my second office. And somebody came up to me and started shouting at me that my kippah, my yarmulke, is against the law. It's not against the law in Israel to have a Palestinian flag. There are attempts by the Minister of Internal Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's a cabinet minister who I don't find particularly pleasant, or whose politics don't really represent mine at all. There have been attempts by him to ban that flag, but it isn't against the law. Anyway, this guy called the police, and the police, who unfortunately have become more and more infused by the politics of Ben-Gvir, took me to the police station, put me in a cell, and to cut a long story short, they let me go after 20 minutes or so, but they cut the Palestinian flag out of the kippah. The only way that they would let me go is to cut that flag out.
Just tell us about what happened at the station, because we turned to the police to get their side of this, and their statement, they say that the individual, you, was brought to the police station, but was neither interrogated nor arrested. They said that you were brought there, and following clarification, these are the words of the police, the individual was subsequently released. Is that how you would view your experience?
Sitting on a cell on your own, not being allowed to speak to your wife or to a lawyer, and not knowing for how long you're going to sit in that cell, it may be technically correct to say that I was not arrested or interrogated, and it was just a clarification process, but it doesn't feel much like a clarification process when you're in that. So it felt to me like I was in a situation where I didn't know what the end result was going to be. I didn't know how long I was going to be there. And like I said, as somebody who is a Zionist, who believes in Israel's right to exist, who loves Israel and certainly loves parts of Israel, although there are parts that drive me absolutely crazy and frustrate me and infuriate me, like this kind of thing. But to be a citizen of a country and feel that the police are seeing you as a problem, that's not a very nice feeling.
So what now? Will you wear another kippah with a Palestinian flag?
Yeah, I mean, I have to get a new one made. This is not the kind of buy off the shelf. It's not a common item, so I'll have to go back to the shop.
As far as the specifics of what happened to you in the police station, is it right that you filed a complaint, have you?
I filed a complaint in the official police investigation department for internal investigations. I've received the kind of official, you get an SMS to your phone that the file has been opened. I've not received any official response to the file yet, to the petition yet. Watch this space. I'm hopeful that common sense might prevail. I want them to pay for a new kippah for me, and I want a letter saying that I'm allowed, a letter from the police saying that I'm allowed to walk around with it without further harassment in the future, and that others as well maybe.
That was Dr. Alex Sinclair, lecturer at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. The former drummer of the Beatles, Ringo Starr, is releasing a new country album today. It's called The Long, Long Road, a familiar-sounding title for Beatles fans, and it is his second album in less than 2 years. The BBC's Reagan Morris recently sat down with Ringo Starr in Los Angeles to discuss his musical journey, but she began by asking him whether she should call him Sir Ringo.
No, Sir Richard.
Ringo Starr is also known as Richard Starkey, or Sir Richard.
That would just confuse everyone.
He was knighted in 2018 for his services to music, but I'm not calling him Sir Ringo.
Just call me Ringo.
Because it's simply not correct.
Yeah.
Now, on to the country music.
Well, it's been too long since we've seen each other. Yeah, it's been too long since we listened to one another.
The Long, Long Road, it was recorded in LA and Nashville, but it feels a lot more Nashville. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, it's a country album, and there's no better place to do a country album than Countryland, Nashville.
You're going on tour. Who's your drummer on tour?
No, I'm the drummer.
You're the drummer.
And next to me is a drummer. Because for the songs I come down, and sing from the front of the stage, we need a drummer. And Greg Bissonet's a great friend, he's a great player, and so he takes over.
I imagine that's a hard job, being Ringo Starr's drummer.
No, we have a lot of
Back in the 1950s and 1960s, though, in Liverpool, like, how on earth did you get into country music?
Liverpool, as everybody who lives there knows, because it was a port, we started with, you know, in a lot of families, one of the sons was in the Merchant Navy, and they were bringing the records over, and because that's when it started to get big, you know, late 50s. It's still known right now as Liverpool is the capital of country music in England. I make fun of it by saying it was like the wife's left, the dog's dead, and I don't have any change for the jukebox. So, I'm down, I don't have no money for the jukebox, you know.
You have loved country music for quite some time, and when you were with the Beatles, I believe you only wrote 2 songs, and one of them was a country song, kind of, Don't Pass Me By.
We did it in a country fashion. Don't pass me by, don't make me cry, don't make me blue.
Can you take us back to what it was like introducing that song to the band, or playing it for the first time?
Well, that was, you know, way into the band. At the very beginning when I started writing, I'd bring my songs in and I'd say, I've got this song, whatever, and they'd all be just laughing, hysterical, because all I'd done is rewritten another song. I just changed the words, and so it took me a while to get through that moment into writing my songs.
Now you're a prolific songwriter.
I am.
All right, thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
Okay, thank you, and don't forget, long
road.
Ringo Starr talking to the BBC's Reagan Morris in Los Angeles about his new album, Long Road. Just a reminder, if you miss any live editions of this programme, you can always catch up with our podcast. We update it twice a day, 7 days a week. Just look for BBC NewsHour podcast in your search engine. And if you want to keep on top of all developments even on our main story, the war in Iran, the negotiations of diplomacy, do go to our website, bbc.com/news, where we have updates. You're listening to the BBC World Service. This is NewsHour, coming to you live from London with James Kumarasamy. Welcome back to NewsHour. A bill to legalise assisted dying in England and Wales has failed after it ran out of parliamentary time. The draft legislation spent months stuck in the upper house of the UK Parliament, the House of Lords, where hundreds of amendments were put forward. There was not enough time before the end of the current session to debate all the changes. Well, I've been discussing developments with our UK correspondent, Rob Watson, beginning with the fact that the bill was passed in the elected House of Commons.
It was in June of last year by a fairly narrow margin after a very passionate debate. But of course, then the talk was of England and Wales joining other countries in an historic decision to allow assisted dying, because there are only that, it's disputed, James, but there are about 10 countries in the world that allow it. And yes, it had looked like Britain was going to become one of them, or at least England and Wales.
So what happened?
As you outlined there, James, in the House of Lords, which is the revising chamber, the unelected chamber, there were huge amounts of amendments to the bill, which are basically as those who wanted to change the bill, who thought there was something wrong with it. And to sort of cut to the chase and to anticipate, no doubt, your next question, what was the main concern in the House of Lords? There were two, basically. One, I guess you might call a philosophical point, and that was concern about safeguarding. How do you protect vulnerable vulnerable people from feeling either coerced by themselves or by family members to end their lives. And then the second was a rather practical concern, which is, okay, if you could get over those massive safeguarding issues, who would do it? I mean, who would carry this out? Would it be Britain's National Health Service? Would it be a private service? Who would do it?
Now, the supporters of this say they're not going to give up. They've sort of failed in this session, but they say they're going to try again. But clearly it's a big setback to those who wanted this to go through.
It is a massive setback, especially after winning the vote in the House of Commons a year ago, and especially so because they've mounted a very passionate campaign. They've had a number of very visible campaigners talking about their own health conditions and their desire to end their own lives. There's been a lot of public support, and the opinion polling suggests that the majority of people, about 65%, are in favour of some form of assisted dying, as opposed to 15% against. So they are hugely disappointed, but it's important to say they haven't given up.
Now, maybe a bit of a technicality for people listening, but I mean, it was interesting. It wasn't the government putting this forward. It was an individual member of Parliament, wasn't it? Did that make any difference?
Absolutely, it made any difference. I won't bore listeners with saying why, but I mean, when the government, which has a massive majority, wants to get a law enacted, it does so. I mean, the reason it didn't in this particular case was just because they felt that it was a moral issue. It was a question of conscience, and therefore it shouldn't be done under the government whipping operation. But it could still come back. There's a new parliamentary session. We'll start in the middle of next month. And if a backbench MP wins a ballot to bring forward legislation again, it could come back.
That was our UK correspondent Rob Watson on the news that a bill to legalise assisted dying in England and Wales has failed to get through Parliament. You're listening to Newshour. You're listening to the BBC World Service. This is Newshour, coming to you live from London with James Kumarasamy. While Russia is waging its war in Ukraine, at home, the Kremlin is fighting another battle for control of cyberspace. Access to popular messaging apps in Russia is now restricted. There are curbs on mobile internet and on VPNs, virtual private networks that are used to get around censorship. Officials claim that it's for reasons of national security. But, as our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg now reports, there is growing domestic criticism of Russia's internet crackdown.
Outside the presidential administration offices in Moscow, people are waiting to submit a petition. They're calling on Vladimir Putin to end internet censorship, to lift restrictions on popular messaging apps and on mobile internet. They have the right to petition their president. But in authoritarian Russia, this is very much putting your head above the parapet.
It's a very small group of people that's come out today, and the suspicion is that people are frightened to publicly demand their constitutional rights are restored. When we turned up here a few minutes ago, we were filmed, we're still being filmed quite closely by security officers on this street. Those who have turned up, pretty brave, I think.
My business is entirely on internet. And
Yulia has signed the appeal. She runs a catering company.
We are losing money every time there is a blockage of internet, there is a blockage of Telegram, there is a blockage of WhatsApp. We are losing, and no one is caring about me. So I need to care about myself here as well.
Aren't you frightened? Aren't you scared?
I'm very. I'm shaking.
Do you think that coming here today will make a difference?
I don't know. Probably not. But it's what I can do.
Вот, мам, это мессенджер Макс. Звони, пиши, все бесплатно и работает отлично.
An advert for Max, Russia's new state-backed messaging app. The authorities are heavily promoting it.
Все отлично.
It's excellent, says the voiceover. But many Russians doubt it's at all secure. Meanwhile, WhatsApp has been blocked, access to the popular Telegram messenger restricted, and in many parts of Russia, curbs on mobile internet mean that only state-approved sites open. The authorities talk about a sovereign internet for a sovereign Russia. It feels like a digital iron curtain is being built.
The idea is to divide Russia from the outside world, because this world is poisonous to the brains of Russians.
Andrei Kolesnikov is a columnist for Novaya Gazeta.
As it was 5 centuries ago, 4 centuries ago, in 19th century, always Russia was a bit blocked from the West primarily. And the West was the source of bad ideas, revolutionary ideas, liberal ideas. It was always like this. So and here is the end of the story, where returning to the main road of the Russian so-called special path.
I travel 120 miles from Moscow to Vladimir. In the town centre, the taxi booking app on my phone opens OK, and I can access state media. But Google searches aren't working, and independent news sites aren't loading. Not that Nadezhda minds. The pensioner tells me she has plenty to keep her busy without the internet, like books, the theatre, and her summer house. But Denise complains that mobile internet restrictions meant he couldn't pay for petrol earlier, and his sat-nav has been glitching. Across town, Yulia Grekova shares her story. She had applied to the local authorities to hold a rally against internet restrictions. She'd listed 11 options for a venue. City Hall replied, "Sorry, not possible. On that day, we'll be cleaning the streets at all 11 locations." Then the police came to her work and warned her, "Don't protest." They filmed me signing an official warning from the prosecutor, Yulia tells me. I felt like some kind of terrorist. It feels like we're sliding back to the past. Back in Moscow, I asked Vladimir Putin's spokesman, is Russia on a road to the past? No, it's not, replies Dmitry Peskov. Security considerations dictate certain measures. Most of our citizens understand that. Once the need for such measures disappears, services will be fully restored and return to normal. Journalist Andrei Kolesnikov fears that restrictions and repression are the new normal.
I don't think that this regime is ready to go back. They only can go forward in terms of more repressions. Maybe it can stop for some time. This machine, it could move slowly, but it will not go back to democracy, to human rights. We are losing the future. Our bright future is our dark past, with our traditional archaic values, without internet. It looks like dystopia.
It also looks like trust in the president is falling. Vladimir Putin's approval rating has dropped to its lowest level since the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. As well as frustration with the internet restrictions, there is concern about the economy and growing fatigue with the war on Ukraine. Boris Nadezhdin is a former MP.
People begin to understand there is a direct connection between their everyday problems, like problems with healthcare, problems with prices on food, problems with internet. People understand that their everyday problems is connected with the politics of Vladimir Putin. And it is a new situation in Russia.
Remember Yulia, who I'd met outside the presidential administration office? She handed in her petition. Now she's back at work, in the kitchen at her catering company.
All the conversation is about survival and all the things like that. Future is not even mentioned in day-to-day conversations with friends, with relatives. It's like what we are doing in 3 days, in a week, in a month. Nothing more than a month.
Just like the bread I can see expanding in the oven, rising across Russia right now is a deep sense of uncertainty.
Our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg reporting from Moscow and Vladimir, and you can watch Steve's full 15-minute report on the BBC News YouTube channel. It's called Inside Putin's Russia. We're cut off from the outside world. A US Special Forces soldier involved in the military operation that captured Nicolas Maduro has been arrested after he allegedly bet on the removal of Venezuela's former leader before the information was publicly available. The US Department of Justice has charged Gannon Ken Van Dyke after he allegedly made trades on Polymarket, a crypto-powered platform, on the basis of classified information. Jeffrey S. Korn is director of the Center for Military Law and Policy at Texas Tech University School of Law. He told me more about the allegations.
I think the allegation is that he made $400,000 on the bet, on a very small commitment, I think around $30,000 initially, and then started to try and cover his tracks by washing that money through different mechanisms.
So what is he being charged under?
Well, he's being charged under a federal statute that makes it a federal felony to misuse classified or sensitive information. He's being charged with federal wire fraud because obviously he was transmitting information across state lines. He's being charged with bank fraud and some other offenses. But the core of the allegation is really a violation of what we call the Espionage Act, which is the federal criminal statute that prohibits unauthorized disclosure or handling of sensitive or classified information.
Are there precedents for something like this?
Well, I don't think there's a precedent for somebody using sensitive information for betting purposes. I mean, this is really a case of first impression where you have the intersection of the illicit profit motive with the availability of these betting markets that allow for betting on something like the capture or removal of Maduro. But having said that, there's nothing particularly remarkable about an individual with special trust and confidence and access to classified information deciding to abuse that trust in order to seek self-profit. Normally, we would think of somebody selling classified information either to a foreign agent or maybe to a publication in order to gain profit. So what's different here is the mechanism by which he executed this motive.
Within the military, how is something like this going to be viewed?
Well, I mean, there are countless numbers of members in uniform and also not in uniform, civil servants, CIA officers, FBI agents all over the country that have secret, top secret, and compartmented information clearances. And you are expected to protect the vital national interests of the nation by not disclosing that information. So it is a very serious dereliction of duty and not something you would expect out of someone who understands so intimately the human risk involved when operational security is compromised by the disclosure of sensitive information. So, I mean, I'm sure within his community, it was a shock and probably something nobody expected. But candidly, that's often the nature of military crimes in a professional armed force, whether it's the U.S., the U.K., or any service, because we expect such high standards out of our personnel, especially experienced professionals in that special operations community, that these type of breaches do have kind of a shock effect.
Are there particular guardrails in place in the military against these kind of instances?
Well, of course, there's the military disciplinary code. He's being charged under federal criminal law by the United States attorney, and that doesn't mean that he couldn't be also subject to discipline within the military. And then there's also counter espionage agents within the military that are always looking for breaches or leaks of information. But the primary mechanism of protecting classified information is, number one, issuing someone a clearance because they've done a background check and we're confident that they're trustworthy. And number two, limiting their access to only information that they have a need to know. And he was involved in this raid, so he satisfied both of those requirements. There's never a guarantee that those mechanisms will secure classified information. I mean, we've had extremely high-level officials disclose classified information.
That was Jeffrey S. Korn, the director of the Center for Military Law and Policy at Texas Tech University School of Law. You're listening to the BBC World Service, and this is NewsHour, coming to you live from London with James Kimarasamy. You are listening to the BBC World Service, and this is NewsHour, coming to you live from London with James Kimarasamy. The Chinese artificial intelligence company DeepSeek has unveiled its long-awaited new model V4. Last year, you may remember, DeepSeek's first open-source model caused tech turmoil in the markets because it matched the capabilities of some of its American rivals at a much lower cost. Well, Alex Hearn is The Economist's AI writer. So do DeepSeek's rivals have reason to be worried again?
The thing is, they do, because DeepSeek V4, the new model, is just like DeepSeek V3. It is a very good system. DeepSeek themselves say it's 3 to 6 months behind the American frontier, and it's very cheap to run. You can buy tokens on it from DeepSeek at around a quarter of the cost of the frontier American models. But the thing is, that's not a surprise, right? And this is, I think, what's really different compared to where we were this time last year, is there's no DeepSeek moment because we already know this is a tremendously capable lab. And so V4 coming out and being tremendously capable is what we all expected.
Yes, I mean the ones who really suffered in the short term was Nvidia, of course, the semiconductor maker. That huge drop. I mean, I think the biggest ever drop, wasn't it, of stocks in history?
It was, and that's actually one of the few things that hasn't been repeated this time. The initial DeepSeek shock in early 2025 came in part because DeepSeek themselves said that model was not only very cheap to run, but had been trained extraordinarily cheaply, that they'd spent around $6 million on the final run using NVIDIA GPUs. This time, they've not shared a comparable figure, and it seems unlikely they managed to get away with quite such a shock in training costs.
So what do you say the significance of this version is?
One of the big things is it shows how hard DeepSeek has been trying, we believe at the behest of the Chinese government, to decouple itself from NVIDIA, and the lack of success that it's had. It doesn't say explicitly anywhere in the technical details that it's put out alongside this model that it's been trained on oodles of NVIDIA chips, and yet it has. The technical details are riven throughout with details that are specific to NVIDIA. It does, however, say that it managed to get one particular chunk of the model running on chips made by Huawei, the Chinese tech giant. But sort of, again, reading between the lines, nothing but that one piece. It's desperately trying to hedge to have a system that works with Huawei, and it's believed that the delay in this model, which is 15, 16 months after its predecessor, has come about because the company's been scrambling for that, but it hasn't managed to achieve it.
And the significance of it being open source?
Open source models is a big way that the Chinese labs, not just DeepSeek, are trying to approach this market. If you can't create something that goes toe-to-toe with the big closed American labs, then the next thing you can do is create something almost as good and release it for others to use as they see fit. You can download DeepSeek V4 and run it on your own hardware if you have a powerful enough computer. The thing about it is, while it's great not having to ask permission, it also sort of removes control for better and worse. The big thing about an open source model is that this is the most powerful model available to criminals, to malefactors, to anyone who wants to do things with AI that a large American company wouldn't let them.
Interesting. And when it comes to cybersecurity then, what are the implications?
Well, exactly. So you'll have seen recently, Anthropic made a big deal about its Mythos preview model. This was a phenomenally capable cybersecurity actor that they ended up doing behind closed doors access to a bunch of large American corporations. DeepSeek V4 isn't there. DeepSeek themselves compare it to Anthropic's earlier models, Opus 4.6 to use the model names. But again, this is one of a number of Chinese models that's perfectly capable of doing what's known as agentic software engineering.
That was Alex Hearn, the AI writer for The Now we are going to turn to something you might remember, the striking photo of a long snaking queue of climbers waiting to reach the summit of Mount Everest just a few years ago. Well, overcrowding on sections of the world's tallest mountain happens quite a lot for various reasons, and there is another logjam this year. Not at the summit, much lower down, and the reason for that is simple. There is a huge block of ice in the way just above base camp. Well, Kenton Cool is a British mountain guide who has been taking people up Mount Everest for more than 20 years. He has recently arrived in Nepal and he is hoping to make his way to base camp, and he's been explaining the situation to my Newshour colleague James Menendez.
The issue is you've got to negotiate what's called the Khumbu Icefall, a very complicated river of ice to get into the upper regions of the mountain. And every year the icefall doctors go into this icefall, they negotiate it, they find a safe passageway through it, or as best they can. But this year there is an unstable, huge serac, so think an ice cliff, which they deem too dangerous to negotiate round. So this has caused a halt to date on the fixing of the rope up to Camp 1 and Camp 2, and it's essentially halted progress on the mountain.
So what happens? I mean, does that mean no one's going to get through, or do you just have to wait? What's next?
Well, nobody really knows. I mean, there's all sorts of rumors flying around. What we do know is that as of today, the icefall doctors, who are governed by the SPCC, that's the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee, are joining forces with the Expedition Operator Association, and they're putting together a crack team of Sherpas to go back into the icefall tomorrow morning with a view to try to either ascertain if that ice cliff is indeed unstable or perhaps it's fallen down and is now safe, or try to find another possible route through the icefall. But time is ticking. It's already at least 2 weeks later than it was last year, when they opened the icefall.
So what are the implications for that? Assuming that access does become available, is this going to create problems during the climbing season?
But potentially, yes, because what you would expect to see by now is most of the teams would have been moving logistics up the mountain. That's tents, oxygen cylinders, food, rope, climbing equipment, whatever it may be. And climbers would be acclimatizing on the mountain, letting their bodies physiologically change to the higher altitudes. None of that is currently happening. So if and when the icefall is opened, there's going to be a rush to get logistics in place, and there's going to be a rush of climbers to try to start that acclimatization program. And that could mean potentially bottlenecks, not high on the mountain, like you said in the intro, but lower down on the mountain in the icefall, which is something we don't normally expect to see.
The British mountain guide Kenton Cool speaking to Newshour's James Menendez from Nepal. And that brings to an end this edition of the programme. From me, James Kumarasamy, and the rest of the team here in London, thanks so much for listening.